I was a widowed father, just 32, trying to raise two little kids after my wife died. When Molly came into our lives as a nanny, I thought she was heaven sent, the answer to my prayers. She smiled at my children, cooked in my kitchen, and promised me love when I was drowning in grief. But years later, I would learn the truth. Molly wasn't here to heal me. She was here to destroy me. And the night her father, an ex-FBI agent, stepped into my house with her was the night I realized just how deep betrayal can cut. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I never planned to fall in love again. After my wife passed, every day was a battlefield. My mornings began with my daughter crying for her mother, my son asking questions I couldn't answer, and me staring at a house that felt half empty. Grief doesn't just take the person you love. It eats away at the walls of your home. It steals the light. It makes the air heavy. So when Molly arrived, I was desperate for stability. She was young, American, full of energy. The children adored her almost instantly. She painted with them, read them bedtime stories, and filled the silence with laughter I thought I'd lost forever. I remember the first night I walked past their room and saw them giggling under blankets with her, like they'd known her forever. In that moment, I thought, maybe, just maybe, we could be happy again. At first, it was all innocent. She was a caretaker. I was the grieving father. But grief blurs boundaries, and loneliness makes you hear promises in every kind word. Molly wasn't just helping the kids. She was helping me. She'd make dinner and sit across from me at the table, her eyes soft, her words comforting. She told me she admired how strong I was, how devoted I was to my children. And for a man who had felt broken for so long, those words were like oxygen. Love grew quietly between us. By 2011, I asked her to marry me. I thought I was giving my children a mother, giving myself a partner, and giving all of us a future. I couldn't have been more wrong. When we moved to North Carolina, it felt like a fresh start. New country, new home, new dreams. I worked hard, but I came home each evening believing I had built something safe for my family. Molly decorated the house, filled it with photos, planned weekends. To the outside world, we looked like a picture-perfect family. But behind the smiles, there were cracks. Small at first. Molly grew possessive of the children, my children. She didn't like when I reminded them of their mother, or when my family from Ireland called to check in. She told me it was confusing for them. She said I should let go of the past if I wanted to move forward. At first, I thought she was just trying to protect me. But slowly, I realized she wasn't protecting me at all. She was isolating me. Conversations turned into arguments. Arguments turned into silences. And silences became walls. Still, I stayed. Why? Because every time I looked at my children, I thought, this is worth it. I can endure the cracks. I can fix this. I can hold this family together. But there are some things you can't glue back once they've broken. That IT was little things that first unsettled me. Molly had a temper, sharp and sudden. If I disagreed with her, she'd twist my words into attacks. She began to control the money, insisting it was easier if she managed the bills. She started going through my phone, asking questions about work, about calls, about messages from friends. One night, I came home late after a business dinner. She was sitting in the dark, waiting, her eyes cold. "Who were you with?" she asked. I explained. She nodded, but her silence screamed louder than any accusation. I brushed it off, told myself it was stress, told myself every marriage had rocky moments. But deep down, I felt it. Something was wrong. By 2014, things were unraveling faster. My kids came to me, quietly, hesitantly. "Dad, we don't like how Molly yells at us." My heart cracked hearing that. They were too young to carry fear like that. I tried to talk to her, tried to reason, but she would always twist it back onto me. "You're too soft on them. You let them walk all over you. You don't know how to be strict." Strict? No. I knew the difference between discipline and cruelty. I started writing things down. Dates, times, incidents. Not because I wanted to leave her. At that time, I still believed in saving our marriage, but because some instinct whispered, you'll need this later. And then came the day that changed everything. IT was August 2015. Hot, suffocating summer heat clung to every corner of the house. The kids were upstairs. The hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence. Molly's father, Thomas Martins, had come to stay with us. He was ex-FBI, retired, but still carried himself like he was the authority in every room. I tried to welcome him, tried to believe he was just a concerned parent visiting his daughter. But something in his eyes, I'll never forget it. Cold, measuring, like he wasn't meeting a son-in-law, but a target. That night, everything fell apart. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard voices downstairs. Heated, hushed. I recognized Molly's sharp tone, then Thomas's lower growl. My stomach tightened. I couldn't catch every word, but I caught enough. We can't wait any longer. Wait for what? When I walked into the hall, the air felt different. Heavy, electric. Molly looked up the stairs at me, her face pale, but her eyes weren't afraid. They were determined. And that's when I knew. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't an accident. It was planned. They think betrayal is a single act, a lie, a punch, a betrayal of trust. But it isn't. Betrayal is a slow poison. It's the small manipulations, the steady erosion of faith, the planting of seeds until one night, you realize the person sleeping beside you is no longer your partner but your enemy. That night, my house stopped being a home. It became a battlefield. And as I looked at Molly standing beside her father, whispering things I couldn't quite hear, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't about love anymore. This was about survival. The weeks after that night were the longest of my life. I was living under the same roof with people who smiled at me by day, but whose whispers at night told me they were plotting something far darker. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. Footsteps in the hall. The murmur of voices drifting up from the kitchen. The clink of glasses at midnight. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught pieces. Words like timing, evidence, control. Words that don't belong in a marriage. Words that don't belong in a family. And through it all, Molly would wake up each morning, brush her hair in the mirror, kiss the kids on their foreheads, and act like nothing was wrong. But her smile was stretched too tight, her laughter too sharp. I wasn't just living with my wife anymore. I was living with a stranger. At first, I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. Stress, exhaustion, grief playing tricks on me. I had been through so much already. Maybe I was paranoid. But then I started noticing the changes. My phone moved from where I'd left it. My laptop logged out of accounts I hadn't touched. A file from work missing, only to turn up days later in the wrong folder. At first, I thought maybe the kids had been playing around. But kids don't know how to reset passwords or delete call logs. And Molly, she was careful, but not careful enough. Once, I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly and saw her snatch her phone off the counter like it was a loaded weapon. Another time, I overheard her whispering into the receiver, only for her to hang up the moment I entered the room. She wasn't hiding an affair. I almost wished she was. At least that I could understand. No, this was worse. This was methodical. This was planned. And her father? He made it worse. Thomas would sit across from me at dinner, his fork tapping against his plate in rhythm, his eyes locked on mine like he was waiting for me to flinch. He'd ask questions about my finances, how much was in savings, how the accounts were structured, whether my will had been updated. Questions no father-in-law casually asks over roast chicken. I'd laugh it off, change the subject, but inside I was screaming. Why was he so interested? Why was my life being dissected like a case file? One night, when Molly thought I was asleep, I heard them in the kitchen again. Their voices carried up through the vents. Thomas, you need to be patient. Rushing will only make him suspicious. Molly, I can't stand it anymore. He doesn't trust me. The kids, they don't listen. He's slipping away. Thomas, then let him slip. But when he does, we'll be ready. I remember sitting up in bed, my heart hammering. Ready for what? That's when I began documenting everything. Every odd question, every missing file, every strange phone call. I wrote it all down, hid in notebooks where they'd never think to look, inside old paint cans in the shed, under loose boards in the attic. I started carrying a small voice recorder in my pocket, just in case, because deep down I knew one day someone was going to ask me, "What happened to you, Jason?" And I wanted the truth written in ink, not buried in silence. But documentation wasn't enough. If they were planning something, I needed to know what. So I tested them. One evening, I told Molly I was thinking about changing my will. Her eyes lit up just for a second before she caught herself. "Oh, well, that's smart," she said. "You never know what could happen." Another night, I casually mentioned that my brother in Ireland had been asking questions about the farm, about the house. Thomas's jaw tightened. His fork froze mid-bite. "Your family doesn't need to worry about that," he said flatly. "You've got it handled here." And then came the moment that confirmed everything I pretended to be sick. Nothing dramatic. Just a bad headache, a little dizziness. I stayed in bed, curtains drawn, letting them think I was weaker than I was. Within hours, Molly was on the phone. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. "If he doesn't recover, the paperwork is ready. Yes, tomorrow, maybe. We just have to wait." Wait. From that night on, everything changed. I stopped being the grieving husband. I stopped being the man trying to hold his family together. I became something else, a survivor. I moved carefully, silently, pretending I was still blind. I smiled when Molly kissed my cheek. I laughed at Thomas's stale jokes. I ate dinner like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was cataloging every detail. The way Molly always left her phone face down. The way Thomas paced the yard at night, muttering into his own phone. The way the kids whispered to me that Mommy gets mad when we talk about Ireland. I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was certain, and certainty brings clarity. If they wanted me gone, then I had two choices. Wait for them to strike or strike first. They were waiting for me to die. But here's the thing about revenge. It isn't fast. It isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, meticulous. Just like they had been with me. I started small. Copies of documents, hidden in places Molly would never look. Digital backups sent to friends she didn't know I still spoke to. A second bank account, opened quietly just in case. I even made a duplicate of the house key and left it with a trusted neighbor, telling him only, "If anything happens to me, check the safe." And slowly, I began to see the fear shift. Not in me, in them. Molly's temper grew sharper, her patience thinner. She lashed out at the kids, snap at me for the smallest things. Thomas grew restless, pacing, asking more pointed questions. They were waiting for something, but the longer it took, the more desperate they became. And desperation makes people sloppy. Point one night, I found a folder left on the kitchen counter, half open. Inside were printed emails, my emails. Work, bank, even private notes I'd written to myself. She had hacked me. I slipped the folder back exactly as I found it, but inside I was boiling. She wasn't just plotting. She was already inside my life, pulling strings. Another time, I noticed Thomas's briefcase slightly ajar. Inside, I glimpsed a document with my name at the top, legal language, signatures. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I knew enough. They were building a case against me. And that's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. But wars are won with allies. I couldn't fight this battle alone. So I reached out to my family back home in Ireland. Carefully, subtly, never through the house phone, never through computer Molly could access. I called from payphones, from work, even once from a stranger's cell at a gas station. I told them enough to raise alarm, but not so much that it would put me in immediate danger. "Keep an eye on things," I said. "If you don't hear from me for a while, ask questions." My brother's voice was tight, worried. "Jason, you need to get out." But I couldn't. Not yet. My children were here. My home was here. If I left, Molly and Thomas would spin their story, claim I abandoned them, maybe even take the kids away for good. No, I had to stay. I had to fight from within. And so I waited, documenting, recording, preparing. Every day was a performance. Every smile, every "I love you," every casual conversation. But behind it all, I was sharpening my weapon. The truth. The tension built like a storm cloud. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. And then the storm broke. It was late at night. I was in bed, pretending to sleep, when I heard the creak of the stairs. Soft footsteps. 2 sets. I tensed, my hands sliding beneath the pillow where I had hidden the recorder. Voices in the hall. Molly's whisper. Tonight. It has to be tonight. Thomas's reply. Keep your story straight. We'll say it was self-defense. Self-defense. Those words sliced through me like a knife. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just let the recorder capture every word, every plan, every whisper. When their footsteps faded, I opened my eyes to the darkness and thought, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet. From that night forward, my purpose was clear. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to make sure the world knew exactly what they had done. And when the truth came out, when the evidence spilled into the light, Molly and her father would realize one thing. They had chosen the wrong man to betray. The night I caught their whispers on tape, I felt the tide shift. They thought they were hunters, closing in on prey. But in reality, they had walked straight into a trap of their own making. For weeks, I had lived like a man walking on glass, every step calculated, every breath measured. But the moment my recorder captured those words, self-defense, tonight, everything changed. Fear didn't vanish completely, but it turned into something sharper. Purpose. Now I had proof. Not suspicion, not paranoia, not the fragments of a worried mind. Solid proof. My wife and her father were plotting my downfall, rehearsing the very lie they planned to feed the world. I sat up in bed after they left, the recorder warm in my palm. For the first time in months, maybe years, I smiled. They had no idea. The next morning, I went about my routine like nothing had happened. Coffee brewing, kids laughing, the sound of cartoons filling the living room. Molly fluttered around the kitchen, her smile painted on like a mask. Sleep well, she asked. Like a baby, I said, sipping my coffee. Thomas sat across from me, eyes scanning me like a predator still sizing up prey. He didn't know that the tables had turned. That day at work, I made copies of the recording. Not just one, several. I placed one in a safety deposit box, mailed another to my brother in Ireland, and stored a third on a secure drive only I knew about. If anything happened to me, the truth would surface. But proof wasn't enough. If I truly wanted revenge, if I wanted justice, I needed them to bury themselves even deeper. And so, I gave them the rope that I started acting weaker, moving slower, leaving bills forgotten on the counter, pretending I couldn't remember where I'd put my keys. Molly noticed, of course. Her eyes gleamed whenever I stumbled over a detail. You should rest more, she'd say, her tone dripping with false concern. Thomas grew bolder, too. He asked outright if I considered life insurance for the children's sake. I chuckled, feigning confusion. Oh, I wouldn't even know where to start with that. I told him. Inside, my rage boiled. Every word they spoke was another nail in their coffin. But living under constant threat is exhausting. I'd tuck the kids into bed, kiss their foreheads, and sit awake in the dark, wondering how much longer I could keep this act up. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them. One evening, my daughter crept into my room. "Daddy," she whispered, "why does Mommy get mad when we talk about Ireland?" My throat tightened. I pulled her close, smoothing her hair. "Because some people don't like to be reminded of the truth," I said softly. "But you must always remember where you come from." Her eyes, wide and searching, seemed too old for her little face. "Are we safe?" she asked. Safe. Such a small word. Such a heavy question. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "As long as I'm here, you're safe." But deep down, I knew safety was slipping further away with each passing day. Then came the night that tested everything. I came home later than usual. The kids were asleep upstairs. Molly and Thomas sat in the living room, wine glasses in hand, their conversation hushed but tense. "He's slipping," Molly said. Thomas nodded. "Then we push harder. Tomorrow, maybe, or the next." We can't let this drag on. I stood in the shadows, listening. Every word fueled a fire inside me. Tomorrow. They were planning something for tomorrow. I stepped into the room, pretending to stretch. Everything okay? I asked casually. They both jumped, their smiles too quick, too rehearsed. Fine, Molly said. Just talking about bills. Bills, Thomas echoed. I nodded, suppressing a laugh. They thought they were so clever. But tomorrow wasn't their day. It was mine. That night, I made my final preparations. I gathered every notebook, every recording, every document, and locked them into the safe hidden behind a false panel in my office. I left a sealed envelope addressed to my brother, tucked where only a trusted friend would find it if I disappeared. Then I sat at my desk, staring at a photo of my late wife. I failed you once, I whispered, but I won't fail them. Not again. The next day, I played my role better than ever. I let Molly fuss over me, let Thomas lecture me about responsibility. I even stumbled on the stairs deliberately to sell the illusion of weakness. Inside, my mind was a steel trap, waiting to snap shut, and snap it did. That evening, Thomas cornered me in the study. He closed the door, leaned against the desk, and fixed me with that cold stare. You need to think about your future, he said. What happens to your children if you're gone? I met his gaze, my expression calm. What happens to them if I'm here? He didn't like that answer. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought he might actually lunge at me, but instead he straightened and muttered, Don't be stupid, Jason. You can't hold on forever. Forever. If only he knew how wrong he was. That night, the whispers grew louder. They thought I was asleep again. I lay still, recorder hidden under the pillow. Molly's voice, sharp and urgent. We can't wait any longer. If he doesn't sign, then we have to make it happen. Thomas's growl. We'll say he attacked you. No one will question it. I'll handle the rest. The air in the room grew heavier with every word. But instead of fear, I felt calm. Ice cold, steady calm. Because I knew this was it. The final piece. I let them finish their plotting, their rehearsed lies. Then, when the house fell silent again, I slipped the recorder into the safe with the others. Now I had them. Completely. Over the next days, I acted as though nothing had changed. I laughed at the breakfast table. I helped the kids with homework. I even kissed Molly's cheek before work. But inside, every moment was a countdown. Because betrayal has a strange effect. At first, it shatters you. Then, it hardens you. And once you've been hardened by betrayal, you don't just seek justice. You demand it. I wasn't waiting for survival anymore. I was preparing for war. And when the moment came, when the truth was unleashed, Molly and her father would learn the most painful lesson of all. The man they thought was broken was the one writing their downfall. I had the evidence, I had the plan, and I had the patience. Now, it was only a matter of time before the trap closed completely. The strangest thing about betrayal is how ordinary the days look, even when you know the storm is coming. The sun still rises, the kettle still whistles, and the world goes on like nothing is wrong. But inside my house, every smile was a mask, every conversation a weapon. I played my role perfectly. To the kids, I was dad, steady, dependable, cracking jokes over burnt pancakes. To Molly, I was a fading husband, weaker by the day, an obstacle soon to be removed. To Thomas, I was prey, blind to predators' claws. But behind the curtain, every step, every word, every movement was recorded, stored, and prepared. The noose wasn't around my neck. It was around theirs. That IT started on a Sunday evening when the children were away at a sleepover. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Molly was in the kitchen, Thomas in the den. I sat in the living room, staring at the clock. My hands trembled, not from fear, but anticipation. At exactly 7 o'clock, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, and the sound of the message played loud enough for them to hear. This is Detective Howard. The voice said, Mr. Corbett, we received your package. We need to set up a time to go over the recordings. Molly froze in the doorway, her face draining of color. Thomas stepped into the room, his jaw tightening. "What was that?" Molly asked, her voice too high, too sharp. I smiled. "Oh, nothing. Just business." They exchanged a look, and for the first time, I saw it. Fear. That night, Molly tried to be affectionate. She touched my arm, leaned close, whispered things she hadn't whispered in months. "You know I love you, right?" she said, her eyes wide, desperate. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had once laughed with my children, who had pretended to mend my broken heart, now stood before me like a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Do you?" I asked softly. She faltered, and that silence was louder than any confession. I stood, leaving her in the dim kitchen, and whispered under my breath, "Game over." The next day, Thomas confronted me in the driveway. His fists clenched, his face red. "You think you're smart," he hissed. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me? Over us." I stepped closer, so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "I don't need them to believe me," I said. "I just need them to hear you." He froze, his eyes narrowing. He knew. Every word he'd spoken, every whisper in the dark, was on tape. He didn't speak again. He just turned and stormed into the house, slamming the door. And I felt lighter than I had in years. But betrayal doesn't die quietly. It thrashes, it claws, it fights to the bitter end. 2 nights later it happened. I woke to footsteps in the hall. Heavy, deliberate. My pulse quickened as I reached beneath the pillow, touching the recorder, already running. The door creaked open. Molly stood there, her silhouette sharp against the hallway light. And behind her, Thomas. He held something in his hand, a baseball bat. My chest tightened, but I stayed still, feigning sleep. "Now," Molly whispered. The floor creaked as Thomas stepped forward. And that's when I sat up. The look on their faces, shock, fear, rage, was burned into my memory. "Do it," I said calmly. "Finish what you started." Thomas froze, the bat trembling in his hands. Molly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Every word," I continued, "every plan, every threat, it's all recorded. The police have it. My family has it. If you touch me, your lives are over." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then, slowly, Thomas lowered the bat. "You don't know what you've done," he muttered. I smiled, a cold, bitter smile. "No, you don't know what I've done." The days that followed were chaos. Molly tried tears, then rage, then silence. Thomas disappeared for hours, making frantic phone calls. But it was too late. The recordings were out. The documents were delivered. One morning, 2 police cars pulled up to the house. The children, sleepy-eyed, watched from the window as officers led Molly and Thomas away in handcuffs. Molly screamed my name, her voice breaking. "Jason, please, tell them it's not true. Tell them." I closed the door. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, truly quiet. But revenge, even when justified, leaves scars. I sat at the kitchen table that night, staring at the empty chairs. My children's laughter echoed faintly in my memory. My late wife's smile flickered like a ghost. I had won. I had survived. But the cost was steep. Molly had promised to be a mother to my children. Instead, she became their nightmare. Thomas had promised to protect his daughter. Instead, he led her into ruin. And me? I had promised myself never to be fooled again. Weeks later, I stood in court. The recordings played aloud, Molly's voice trembling, Thomas's growl filling the room. The jury watched, their faces hardening with every word. When the verdict came, guilty, I felt no joy, only release. Justice had been served. But justice cannot rewrite the past. Back at the farm, I walked the fields alone, the wind cold against my skin. The children were safe with relatives for now, far from the whispers and headlines. I stopped beneath an old oak tree, the one my late wife had loved. I kept my promise. I whispered. I protected them. I didn't let the darkness win. The leaves rustled, and for a moment I felt as if she were there, standing beside me. Life moved on, slowly, Painfully, but forward nonetheless. I cooked dinners, helped with homework, tucked my children in at night. I told them stories of their mother, stories of love, stories of strength. And when they asked about Molly and Thomas, I told them the truth, because lies may shield for a time, but truth builds walls at last. I learned that night that betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. They tried to break me. They thought they could erase me. But all they did was remind me of the one truth I will carry until my last breath. No matter how dark the night, a father's love burns brighter. And that love, unyielding, unbreakable, is the greatest revenge of all. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this. Betrayal can come from the people you trust the most, but it doesn't have to destroy you. Family is not about taking advantage. It is about standing together through storms. Children, respect your parents, for they carried you when you could not walk and sacrificed when you did not even know the meaning of sacrifice. A house, a piece of land, or a bank account is not worth more than the hands that raised you. Greed may fill your pockets for a season, but will empty your soul forever. Once you trade love for profit, you are left with neither. I lost years to betrayal, but I gained wisdom through survival. And wisdom whispers this truth. Protect the ones who truly love you, because they are rarer than gold. If you are a parent, never underestimate your strength. Your patience, your knowledge, and your quiet resilience can turn the tide of any storm. If you are a child, remember, one day, you too may be in the shoes of those you betray. And when that day comes, you will long for the trust you destroyed. Life is short, but the wounds of betrayal last forever. So honor family, respect sacrifice, and build your own future with clean hands. For at the end of it all, when wealth fades and houses crumble, only love and loyalty remain. And that, my friend, is the greatest inheritance you can ever give or receive. Thank you for listening to my story. For more powerful tales of betrayal and justice, subscribe to True Revenge and join us every day for a new story.